So, with all that has been happening in the UK and all the videos that I have been doing on my Body Language Guy channel, I've been thinking about the British royal family and how they deal with politics. I mean, remember that I'm still a novice in many aspects of British culture, and I saw not fans of the royal family, but people who usually criticize the royal family, demanding that the king should say something, anything. Some even suggested that William should mount a horse and somehow make Britain great again, along those lines. But jokes aside, it's kind of interesting when you really get into it. Like, they're supposed to stay neutral and not get involved in political stuff. But it's not always that simple. For one, it's actually kind of baked into how the UK government works. It's not written down in some big rule book or anything, but it's like an unspoken agreement that everyone follows. First off, there's this idea of constitutional convention. Those are fancy words, yes, but it basically just means that the king or queen isn't supposed to go around telling everyone what they think about politics. It's been this way for ages, and it's part of what keeps the monarchy, well, neutral. There are some written laws that relate to the monarchy and its powers, like the Bill of Rights from 1689 or the Act of Settlement from 1701. These laws limit the monarch's power in some ways, but the specific idea that the royals should be politically neutral, that's mostly based on convention and tradition. Then you've got the prime minister and the rest of the government. They are the ones who are supposed to deal with all the political stuff. If there's a riot or some kind of protest, it's not the king who is going to come out and make a statement. It's going to be the prime minister or maybe some other government big shot. But there's a funny thing, though. Sometimes the monarch does make public statements, but they usually don't just decide to do it on their own. They talk to the prime minister first. It's like they are checking to make sure whatever they're going to say isn't going to cause a big political mess. And then there's the whole media and public opinion thing. People in Britain, they kind of expect the royals to stay out of politics. The newspapers and TV shows, they're always watching, waiting for the royals to slip up and say something political. If they did, oh boy, it would be all over the news. People would be talking about it for weeks. It's like the royals are walking this really fine line all the time. They've got to seem interested and involved in what's going on in the country, but not so involved that they're taking sides. It must be pretty tricky, always watching what you say, making sure that you don't accidentally let your real opinions slip up. And let's start with Queen Elizabeth II. She was on the throne for a very long time, 70 years, and that's a lot of years to keep your mouth shut about politics, right? But she was really good at it. I mean, she had to deal with this motley crew of prime ministers, and she never really said what she thought about any of them. There was this one time back in 1975 when things got a bit tricky. It wasn't in the UK, but in Australia. The Queen is also the head of state there, and there was this big political mess. The Prime Minister, Gough Whitlam, got fired by the Governor General, who was like the Queen's representative in Australia. A lot of people thought the Queen should step in and do something. But she didn't. She just let them sort it out themselves. That's kind of how she rolled, staying out of it even when things got messy. But not everyone in the royal family found it as easy as the Queen did. Take Prince Charles, who's now King Charles III. He's always been a bit more outspoken, I guess you could say. He's really into things like the environment and architecture, and he hasn't always been shy about saying what he thinks. In 2015, there was this whole thing with what they call the Black Spider Memos. Strange name, right? I thought it had to do with some Spider-Man or Marvel stuff, but no, it's because Charles has this really scribbly handwriting. Anyway, these were letters he wrote to government ministers between 2004 and 2005. He was writing about all sorts of things, from farming to buildings, and when these letters came out, it caused a bit of a stir. People were asking if it was okay for him to be trying to influence the government like that. And Charles seemed to realize he needed to tone it down as he got closer to becoming king. And in 2018, when he turned 70, he was in this documentary where he made it clear that being king would be different from being Prince of Wales. So he knows he's got to change his approach now that he's on the throne. But there was also Brexit. Brexit, not Mexit. Brexit. Man, that was a mess. It really divided the country, and everyone was watching to see if the royals would say anything about it. And in 2019, the Queen gave this speech at the Women's Institute. She didn't mention Brexit directly, but she talked about people coming together and finding common ground. A lot of people thought that she was hinting at the whole Brexit situation, but the palace was quick to say that it wasn't about politics. Now, the younger royals have been a bit different. Let's start with the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. You know that they've been more vocal about things like racial equality and freedom of speech, but then there was Mexit. So right now their opinions are no more relevant than those from your average YouTuber. So now that Charles is king, people are wondering how he's going to handle it. He's been talking about climate change and other stuff for years, and we know that these kind of topics are closely related to politics. Is he going to keep that up now that he's king, or is he going to have to be more like his mom and keep quiet? And it is not just about what they say in public, though. The royals have these weekly meetings with the prime minister. The Queen used to meet with the prime minister every week for like 70 years. It's hard to imagine all those conversations, and we don't really know what they talk about. It's supposed to be a chance for the monarch to offer advice and support, but they are not meant to try and change government policy or anything. And it's not just the UK they have to think about. The monarch is also the head of state of a bunch of other countries, like Canada. So they've got to be careful not to get involved in those countries' politics too. And please, don't make me talk about Cass Trudeau. And sometimes it's the little things that can cause problems. Like there was this time in 2014 when the Queen was opening Parliament. She was reading out the government's plans, which is something the monarch has to do even if they don't agree with the policies. Some people thought that she looked a bit unhappy when she was talking about a referendum on leaving the European Union, but that's the thing. Even a facial expression can be interpreted as taking sides. So the royals have to be very careful about who they meet as well. If they are seen hanging out with certain politicians or business people, it might look like they are taking sides. That's why their public appearances are planned so carefully. You also have to be mindful about who you are photographed with. Just ask Prince Andrew about that one. And it's not just about big political issues either. The royals have to be careful about social issues as well. Like they can support charities and stuff, but they've got to be careful not to get too involved in anything that might be seen as political. Prince William, he's next in line after Charles, and he seems to be following more his grandmother's footsteps. He's been pretty good staying out of controversy, but he's also trying to make the monarchy more modern and relatable. It's a tricky balance, being relevant but not controversial. And one of the weird things about this whole situation is that the royals are some of the most famous people in the world. But there's so much we don't know about what they really think. It must be frustrating for them sometimes, not being able to speak their minds. But then again, maybe that's part of why the monarchy has survived for so long in the UK. By staying out of politics, they have managed to avoid getting caught up in a lot of the controversies that could have brought them down. It's not like the old days when kings and queens actually ruled the country. Now, their job is more about being a symbol of the nation. They are supposed to bring people together and not divide them. And in a country that's been pretty divided lately, that's probably more important than ever. But you've got to wonder how long they can keep it up. The world's changing so fast, and social media means everyone's expected to have an opinion on everything. How do you stay relevant if you can't say what you think about the big issues of the day? Well, and then there's the whole question of whether it's even right for them to stay out of politics. Some people argue that if the royals have so much influence, they should use it for good. But then others say that any political involvement from them is undemocratic. It's not just about what they say either. Even the charities they support or the countries they visit on royal tours can be seen as political statements. Everything they do is analyzed and picked apart. I guess the big question is whether this whole neutrality thing is sustainable in the long term. As society changes so fast, will people still accept having a head of state who can't express opinion on important issues? Or will the royals have to find a new way of engaging with politics and society? It is a balancing act, really. They've got to be seen as caring about what's going on in the country, but not like they are taking sides. They need to be involved enough to seem relevant, but not so involved that they seem as interfering. In the end, I suppose it comes down to trust. We trust that the royal family is acting in the best interest of the country, even if they are not saying exactly what they think. Think of that as making a statement. By staying neutral, they are doing what's best for the monarchy and the country in the long run. It's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out in the coming years. With Charles on the throne now and William next in line, we might see some changes in how the royals handle this whole neutrality thing. But I reckon they will still be pretty careful about it. After all, it has worked well for them so far. But I would love to know what you think about this in the comments. My name is Jesus Enrique Rosas. I'm the Royal Rogue. Much love and bliss.